Dear friends, colleagues, partners, and guests, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural session of the UWC Impact Talks. My name is Faith Abiodun, and I have the privilege of serving as Executive Director of UWC International. Our webinar today is one of the key initiatives from the UWC 2030 strategy, which is our roadmap for showcasing how UWC's educational model, rooted in deliberate diversity, experiential learning, and values-driven community, inspires transformational leadership and innovative solutions to humanity's most pressing challenges. If you have not read our strategy document, I highly recommend that you do so, and the link is now in the chat. The mission of the United World Colleges is to make education a force to unite people, nations, and cultures for peace and a sustainable future. But how do we bring this mission to life? We believe that in pursuit of lasting peace, social justice, and a sustainable future, the world needs active global citizens, the people who work daily to enact positive change at every level of society. And the world also needs transformational leaders, people who work at the systems level to create broad-based solutions that can influence humanity at scale. The good news is that UWC develops both active global citizens and transformational leaders. And we think about them as architects of a new humanity. Our conversation today centers on the topic that is at the heart of our mission and our strategy, the future of education and how learning must evolve for the world in 2030 and beyond. At a time when education systems globally are under pressure from rapid technological change, from conflict, from inequality, and the climate crisis, we want to ask, what kind of learning do young people need now? And how can UWC's values help to shape it at scale? We will be hearing today from 4 exceptional leaders who just so happen to all be graduates of the United World Colleges. So it's now my pleasure to hand over to our moderator, Dr. Camilla Hadi Chaudhary, who is an educational researcher at Cambridge University and an alumna of the United World College of the Atlantic. Hi, Camilla.
Hi, Faith. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm very, very honored and pleased to be here today to moderate this webinar. The conversation that we're going to have attempts to reimagine education in the realities of today, and also how the UWC movement can contribute to such a reimagining. Specifically, in an era of widening socioeconomic inequality, global conflict, climate crisis, and artificial intelligence, what is the role of a value and citizen-based education founded on a commitment to global peace? That and the other questions, these are the important questions that I will pose to my esteemed panel today. And they are Dr. Luis Benveniste, Acting Director for Education at the World Bank, and an alumnus of UWC Atlantic, my alma mater, who brings a wealth of global policy knowledge and experience. Then we have Mr. Robert Tomalin, head of Oeiras International School in Portugal. He is also the chair of the Council of International Schools and also vice chair of the UWC International Council. He is an alumnus of UWC Adriatic, and he brings with him a wealth of practitioner experience. And then we have Arissa Roy, who is a youth representative on the UNESCO SDG4 Youth and Student Network for Europe and North America, and is an alumnus of UWC Adriatic. We're excited to learn about her advocacy and future-based thinking. So I welcome all of you, and I thank you for joining us today for this session. Getting right along into the webinar, my first question I would like to pose to Arissa. Arissa, as an emerging voice in youth leadership and working within the remit of Sustainable Development Goal 4 that focuses on access to education for all, what, in your opinion, are the most pressing issues in education today?
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you so much, Faith, and the entire team for inviting me. This is so exciting to be part of something UWC is organizing, because UWC has consistently been an organization that I think is centering the voices of young people, especially. So thank you for having me. Before I begin, I just want to quickly recognize that I am from Toronto, Canada, and the land that I join you from today is the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. So thank you so much, and I also encourage anyone to also recognize the Indigenous land you are on. So right to your question, I would say that the first thing I've seen be a huge challenge in global education is persistent inequality in access to education. So I started my advocacy work after a very transformational trip to India that I went on when I was 12 years old, where I learned about the ongoing barriers there are in many different communities to accessing quality and equitable education, especially for girls. And after that experience, I was very inspired to talk about this issue more and advocate for young people to access education because I saw it as sort of a pathway to addressing so many other global issues that we face, including climate crisis, for example. And even today, though, I want to recognize that education is still very inaccessible for many communities. One of the main communities that my work is focused on over the last few years is girls in Afghanistan, for example, who still don't have access to education at all and haven't for a number of years now. And that is something that we must address when talking about education. And we are very lucky to be part of, a conversation where we're looking at how to be more creative and future thinking about education, but we have to also recognize that there is still a gap. So that is the first thing I wanted to share. The second thing is I would say that there is still very much a growing mismatch between education and the realities young people face. So, as a UWC alumni who just finished my IB diploma, I think me and my peers are very critical of sort of elements in which our education system may have not reached its full potential. One of the main areas that we've talked about is how many of us are not, for example, good at taking exams, or are more creative learners and we learn in different ways. And I think our education systems are not yet there in terms of recognizing the potential and the diverse ways of representing our learning. So I would say that this is an area that we will need to address because at the end of the day, our education is about learning and is about growing as humans. And so if we continue to function in this somewhat rigid and robotic manner, we're not going to really meet the needs of young people today. And the third thing I would say is youth voices unfortunately remain sort of not present in a lot of the big decisions that have to do with our education. And I find that we can sometimes just be brought in for more tokenistic conversations rather than being present, or not symbolically, but being present throughout the whole process. So I would say, as a call to action to schools and to any UWCs out there, I would say try and make sure that we aren't just inviting young people to speak, but really inviting young people to build. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Arissa. That is so much content and such well thought out ideas and reflections. And it actually brings me really neatly to my next panelist, which is Robert. Robert, building on what Arissa has highlighted and your own knowledge and experience as an educational practitioner, and also someone in a position of leadership, particularly in international education. Arissa has brought up a lot of points, and I'd like you to reflect on those as well as what your own reflections on this question. Can education systems as they function today meet the needs of the world's youth? And what, if anything, needs to change in order for that to happen?
Yeah, so firstly, hello, it's really nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And frankly, it's embarrassing following Arissa because in the 6 months since she's graduated, she's done more than I've done in my entire career. So I'm super humbled to be with you. I think the simple answer is no, they're not currently configured to meet what our young people need today. I think if we look at how education was built, it was really designed for a very different era, and one that kind of focused on stability and predictability, and that you would go from school to university to employment. And all of that is changing now. Everything's very volatile. Things are much more mobile. We have kind of cultural plurality, more global independence. And it's just, I think the context is very, very different. And what we're going into is also even more wildly different than we can imagine. And so there's a big tension, I think, between what we're trying to do as schools and getting students ready for the future as we remember what we thought the future would be and what their future actually is. And so focusing just on exam results, for example, that can't be the way forward. We cannot be focusing just on content and knowledge in inverted commas. What we need to be focusing much more on are things like belonging and inclusion. And I'm talking about academic inclusion as well as that social inclusion. We see far too often our young people getting lost in a world which is very hard for all of us to understand. There's a lot of leaders who are demonstrating behaviors which we, as an international school here at Oeiras International School, we are fighting so hard against that type of misogyny and, despicable is a very emotive word, but frankly, despicable behaviors that we're seeing from some of our world leaders. And then our young people are looking up to them and thinking that that's okay, and it's not okay. So I think there has to be a big focus on belonging, on inclusion. We have to be addressing artificial intelligence and people skills, what it can't do yet, and really fighting the power of social media. Of course, my context is not like all of the UWCs. It's like some UWCs in the sense that we have children in year 2 all the way up to year 13. And what we're competing against is frankly terrifying on social media and screen addiction. And so there's a lot of questions. And I think ultimately we need to change this hierarchy of value and move away just from valuing exam results, moving much kind of closer towards that element of making sure that our young people feel included, that we're using our privilege and our positions to be able to hold space for them and allow, like Arissa was saying, allow them to be actually heard and not just kind of tokenistically talking in the background. So I think, academic achievement, of course, remains important. Thinking of student futures, I think, is really important, not just university, because that would also be exclusive in and of itself. And acting responsibly as socially responsible leaders within very complex social systems.
Thank you. Yes, you've brought up, I'm going to come back to one of the points that you've made about the different priorities that you've highlighted. And I do appreciate the point that you've made about how we're living in the space where our role models are in fact so questionable that how do we promote that for young people? And that also actually very conveniently links to my question to Lewis. Lewis, you have the bird's eye view of education at a global level. You have access to performance indicators across different countries and contexts, education systems that are producing results, and policy initiatives that are actually working. And so my question to you builds on these perspectives, on these different factors. How, in your opinion, are the different suppliers of education, whether they're government, educational foundations, multilateral organizations, how are they approaching the current challenges to education? And very critically, what are they not addressing? You're muted, Lewis, still. I've asked you the easy question.
No, indeed. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Camilla. It's so great to be here. I'm so delighted to join you all today. I'm proudly sporting my UWC tie that I found 40 years later after graduation. And I'm just going to sort of zoom out from what Arissa and Robert were sort of saying, and just sort of looking at a global view. And just to remind all of us about how we are in the midst of a very severe and important learning crisis. Around 70% of children in low and middle income countries today cannot read or understand an age-appropriate text by the age of 10. And if we look at sub-Saharan Africa, that's 9 out of 10 children. And I think it's worth repeating, 9 out of 10 children are not learning those basic foundational skills at school. On that, we layer the fact that over the next decade, about 1.2 billion young people in emerging economies will step into the workforce. And if we sum to that the fact that rapid technological change, the green transition are all sort of outpacing education systems' ability to deliver those types of skills that are so important for work and for life. And so what do education systems need to improve on? And so really sort of the basics are just that we need to put those foundational learnings at the very, very core for both students and teachers. We need to shift education systems and schools from schooling, from being able just to show up at school, to truly learning. And that means prioritizing early literacy and numeracy, supporting socio-emotional development, and so putting into place the kinds of interventions that are evidence-based, that really sort of stimulate these kinds of basic skills. And we see that in places like Kenya or Peru or CRI in Brazil or Vietnam are all good examples of sort of, education systems that really sort of truly have focused on these core skills and sort of align around those. The kinds of stuff that are working, sort of relate to sort of, mother tongue instruction, 1 book per child, ongoing teacher coaching, so phonics reading sort of instruction, what we call teaching at the right level, which is instead of teachers focusing on the curriculum, really focusing on where kids truly are at. And these are all sort of interventions that have delivered outsized gains when implemented at scale. Now, there's a wide variety of blind spots, and this is why we are where we are, which oftentimes relate to sort of how many programs still count inputs, the number of teachers trained, the number of books delivered, without truly verifying the types of learning gains or equity improvements that are taking place. There's also sort of huge problems in implementation capacity. Reforms stall at district level or at school level without the sustained support from local administration or school leadership or teacher career frameworks that truly sort of incentivize people to do and be at their best. Huge data gaps globally, sparse, non-comparable. I mean, there's very few sort of learning data collections that truly hinder accountability, that hinder the ability to really understand what's going on the ground, what's happening in the classroom. And then sort of, huge problems around sort of inclusion, refugee children, children with disabilities, children in conflict and fragile afflicted countries, all need systemic inclusion backed by financing, backed by teacher support, not by parallel programs that sort of are sort of, time bound. And then with the technological revolution, just picking up on what Robert was talking about before, sort of, again, the lack of connectivity, the lack of the fact that sort of, a lot of these platforms are designed, for high-income context, are all sort of have significant risks of bias, poor fit, and unless they're co-designed locally with infrastructure and evidence standards, again, I think that we see significant risks. So what's the path forward? Again, let me repeat, making learning, not schooling, sort of, especially foundational literacy, foundational numeracy, a measurable national priority. We need to invest in teachers as a fulcrum of change. We need to crowd in financing. Just let me also add, on average, a low-income country spends $55 per child per year in education. That's, not adequate for a basic quality education. And so we need to really sort of, make sure that education and education investments are front and center, and we do what's right for the next generation.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much for that. You broadened what we were talking about to the global stage and the, sort of the development work that you do. Before I go on, so synthesizing what you were saying, but before I go on, I just want to tell the audience that there will be lots of ample opportunity for question and answer at the end. So please do start filling in your questions in the question section. I can see there's a lot of chat going on, which is great, but please keep your questions in the areas for the questions, and we will be picking them up at a later stage, and you will have ample opportunity for that. Synthesizing what all three of you have said and your valuable contributions, I've picked up a few things. I mean, you talk about youth voice and actually understanding what youth need from their education right now. But at the same time, that's in an environment of very multimodal, multi-level challenges that are facing youth at every level. And then also the difference in context, the difference in what kind of access we have. When we talk about access in sort of better resourced communities, that's very different from the kind of communities that Lewis was talking about, where basic access to schooling, numeracy, and literacy is what the challenges are. So these are this is a very complex environment that we're talking about. And in this environment, because we are a UWC webinar, my question is, I want to explore the role of United World Colleges movement, not just the colleges, but the movement and the values that underpin the education that we all received and that continues to be given in this current educational climate. And I'm going to stick with you, Lewis, if you don't mind, to start this. In this era, when the value of education is measured on graduates' employability, the potential to be employed. And when conversely, that potential is being challenged by this exploding artificial intelligence. And this is a sort of a dysfunctional kind of space that we're living in. What is the role of a UWC style education that is essentially built on aspirational values, values that look at functionally, purposefully towards a better world?
That's a really, really good question. And, look, a UWC style value-based education is, I would say, increasingly vital as AI shapes employability. So we truly develop, what we need to do is to develop the durable human capabilities, the ethical judgment, the empathy, the collaboration across difference, the civic purpose, the lifelong learning, are also critical to complement rather than compete with intelligent machines. It also anchors young people in service and global citizenship in helping them navigate technological change towards more inclusive and towards more sustainable outcomes. And why it matters now, we need truly to complement AI with human strengths. As automation expands, as the premium rises on social emotional and higher order skills, and importance of teamwork, importance of leadership, importance of creativity, importance of responsibility, are really sort of these are the hardest things to automate and most predictive of positive work and life outcomes. Values-rich experiential models that deliberately cultivate these capabilities at scale are truly critical. Also, I think that we all got out of the UWC experience is how to build global citizenship for a digital age. UWC-style educations are sort of truly unique in its diversity, in its purposeful community, in terms of its outlook towards service and towards its environmental stewardship, and really sort of are all ways in which to really sort of foster critical thinking, ethical digital engagement in terms of how to think about responsibility for local and global commons, in terms of how to navigate all of these AI-related opportunities and risks. And as you were also referring to, Camilla, about this, thinking about agency and resilience, I think that through the type of service learning, outdoor challenge, intercultural living, student practice, sort of are all fostering sort of the courageous action, courageous integrity that sort of really translate into adaptable mindsets and civic leadership that employers increasingly value and communities absolutely need. So, what to watch for? I think that, again, it's also important in this time of technological change to sort of see the red flags. We really need to think about how to integrate academics with the future of work pathways, how to pair that sort of social emotional learning with robust academic rigor, how to really think about sort of real world projects around entrepreneurship or climate solutions or care economy that are all tied to labor markets today. and ultimately sort of how to have a purpose-driven learning that it's tethered in employability. Second, sort of how to really think about measures of how to identify what matters credibly. Sort of how to use validated tools for social emotional and civic outcomes, not just anecdotes, not just inputs, not just tracking alumni transitions. Again, are all ways in which really sort of to continue to hone in what is it that schools and education system need to deliver. And then I think that it's something at the core of the UWC model is around how to widen access and inclusion. Values-based models must avoid sort of elite capture. We need to think about scholarships or needs-blind admissions. We need to think about partnerships with public systems that can truly extend opportunities to underrepresented learners to ensure diversity. So this remains not just a marketing line, but truly a core part of the mission.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was so wonderful and really spoke to my heart for sure. But I'm going to actually take everything that you have said, and I'm going to pose that question to Arissa, who is our most recent graduate. I'm guessing that she's the most recent graduate in this panel. Arissa, UWC is arguably, and as Lewis has outlined, amongst the pioneers of citizenship education at least in the international school space. I'm not going into sort of indigenous learning as much, but in the international school base. Can you tell us how your UWC education prepared you for the work that you are doing actually as a global citizen and linking it with what Lewis just said?
For sure. Thank you so much. There's so many thoughts. I've just been on my screen here typing out reflections to what my co-panelists have been saying. So the first thing I want to say is that, yes, I just graduated UWC in May, so it's been very recent. And, the last few months when I've been trying to explain to people and, new friends here what UWC is, for me, I always say it's more than just a school. It's truly a lifestyle almost, and it's truly like almost a commitment to using our education as a tool for global change. And I think all three of us, and actually probably everyone on this call, can agree to that to a certain extent. And when I reflect on the ways that UWC changed me, I'd say there's two really major ways. And the first one is through storytelling. So there is not a day that goes by while at UWC where you don't hear stories that make you cry, that inspire you, that make you say, huh, like, how did that happen? Why? Like, all these questions. Whether it's, when talking to your roommate in the morning, or a debate you have in your Glopo class, or when you're just having a meal in your Mensa or your dining hall. There's always so many stories that you hear at UWC. And for me, those stories have been probably the most transformational stories I've heard in the last few years. I think that there were many times when I heard stories of my peers that really stopped me in my tracks, that, made me just really mad at the world, but also energized me to keep going in this work, to advocate for more equitability and education, because I could see, how my friends had been impacted by systematic barriers that were stopping them from, receiving access to different resources. And another element to that I wanted to add is, there's so many stories that you hear at UWC where you're like, I don't know what to say. And I think that I don't know, really pushed me to learn what peace actually is. And peace is, a key component in our mission at UWC. And I realized that peace often doesn't start with, what I have to respond to your story. It starts with me actively listening to your story and choosing to be and show up, to hear your voice, right? And one of the main places I can remember this is in October of 2023, when the situation ongoing between Israel and Palestine escalated dramatically and drastically. And I had friends and still have close friends from Israel and from Palestine. And I remember that for the first few weeks, I would be talking with both of them, and they would be almost telling me the same story, but like in the opposite way. So we're the victim, you know? And I just remember thinking, like, this is terrible. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help, but I want to do something. And that's when I realized I didn't really have the tools, and I didn't really know how to have these hard conversations. I was always scared. I didn't know how to approach, these difficult conversations. I didn't want to say something wrong. And that's when, me and a few friends noticed a huge gap in our school, and we ended up starting like a peace council to create space to have more of these conversations. And I think that's sort of the beauty of UWC, right? You have a group of students and young people that have come from such deliberately diverse backgrounds that bring so much creativity and energy, but also a lot of life experience that is hard, right? And you have these 2 years or however, depends on how long what you have that UWC. Some UWCs are more than 2 years, but um, that is sort of the opportunity you get presented at UWC to have those difficult conversations and learn how to do that. And I know I'm running a bit over time, but the second thing I wanted to say just quickly is really, the action part of UWC, how we aren't just the mission statement, but we actually do things that make a difference. And I have this slide that I wanted to put up. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. So these are some, very fond memories I have from my UWC experience. Um, they are moments where I was challenged personally, such as skiing. I am not a very good skier, even though I'm from Canada. And these are moments where UWC put me outside my comfort zone. On the top left corner, you can see a picture of me and this woman who I had the privilege of going every week and volunteering with her. Her name's Silva. And UWC gives you these opportunities to actually go into the communities that you work with, or sorry, that you're living in, and really, support the local community. So that was really cool. Here's also a picture of our Peace Council. And then back to that deliberate diversity, something so beautiful about UWC is embracing each other's cultures. And this is a picture in the middle here of our holy celebration from last year. And then on the far right corner at the top, there's a picture of me and my good friend Medina at the Inner Development Goal Summit in Sweden. And we had the opportunity to help plan the education track for this the IDG summit. And I won't go into more detail, but UWC gives you that opportunity to really put
Take action. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm actually, Arissa, we can come back to your slide in the Q&A as well. So that's not an issue, because I do want to bring in Robert into this conversation as well. Because Robert, you've heard a young graduate from UWC who was a student very recently, and a secondary school student. And she talks about how she took action and she did all these amazing things. And we have other people, from our alumni and current students who do this. How has the UWC educational model informed you as an educator and your practice as an educator? And the second part of that question is, can the UWC values be introduced, nurtured, and sustained in schools beyond UWC? What are the challenges that might happen in it? And what do you think would be needed to ensure that happens successfully? So there are 3 stages to my questions to you. You personally?
Okay, that's complicated. Yeah. 3 stages. See if I can cope. So firstly, my own personal experience within my own learning journey at UWC changed how I saw myself locally, nationally, and internationally. And I think that's something kind of that really worked as a spark. And it was something at a UWC that wasn't abstract, but something structural. So as an educational leader in my context here, you think of an educational system or package, I really firmly believe in the power of the IB. Whenever I'm thinking about the IB or learning for my Colombian students, in inverted commas, and it's lovely to see so many Colombianos in the audience, I always make sure that I'm thinking about to what extent can they come back. So they go off to UWC, can they come back home and thrive in their spaces where they were born and be agents of change back in Colombia? And at the moment, although the IB is not perfect yet, it does allow that to happen. And I love seeing the synergy between UWC and the IB, who of course grew together originally in the creation of things like the Transformative Systems pathway at Atlantic College and UWC SEA. I think it's absolutely amazing and can't wait for that to be kind of taken to a much more global level. So at UWC, diversity wasn't an outcome. It was part of the principle of design, I suppose. And of course, we all know we have students that are different in their nationalities, their passports, their cultural background, their socioeconomic backgrounds, of the horizontal and the vertical diversity with all of the lived and learned experiences. And it's something really, really incredible. And that has really had a good it's had a good impact on how I see things like admissions in my current contexts, financial accessibility, school culture, ethos, that kind of making sure that we're making sure that it's deliberate diversity, and that can't just be a thing or a soundbite. It has to be something that is really intentionally used and brought into everyday life. And so just as a random example, this year we've had a real focus on belonging. And we had tribe activities, so we were talking about the OIS tribe, and we had all of our students coming together to really make sure that they all feel that they are part of our school. And when they feel that they're part of something, the chance of them learning and wanting to share their learning with each other goes up. And I remember back in the UK when I was working in what people considered a really rough school, an immigrant school was how we were talking, and I didn't know what it was that made me feel so happy in that school. And it was challenging. It had, we had all sorts of issues in terms of budget and what we could do and so on and so forth, and we had a really bad reputation as being an immigrant school. And then I realized that what made me feel so at home there was it was like a UWC, but and coming back to the point that Arissa is talking about with the student stories of how they arrived in the UK, they were like harrowing, scary, amazing. And what we did was we changed because I said, look, I've come from this really fancy international school experience, which is UWC and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we've got going on here is incredible. And let's rebrand this. Let's celebrate who we are in our school. And so we stopped being Biddenham Upper School and we became Biddenham International School. And that for me was incredible. And I could see a change in how the students saw themselves and the conversations that we're having. We started the IB there while that was possible back in the day with the funding from the government. But that's really important. So finding ways to embed intentionality and making sure that it's not just random different people rubbing shoulders with each other, but you have got through the curriculum and through the governance strategies and the way you're thinking strategically, you've got these moments where people can learn between each other. So not being multicultural, but being intercultural. Staffing is also really important. I want to make sure I'm now working in an international school here in Portugal, and I don't want everyone to look and sound like me, like a white male Brit. We need to have the diversity of our students reflected back at them, and that they can all look up to their teachers and all of the adults around them and find themselves reflected back in them, find diversity reflected back at them. And I think that's really, really important. So what can we do to take the UWC-ness and get service learning? We've heard it from Arissa, we've heard it from Luis. I've mentioned it already, that place of service learning, not when the privileged do stuff at the people who are less economically privileged, but when you're finding ways to bring people together where they can learn from each other. That is in and of itself amazing. And again, the IB offers a framework or a vehicle to make sure that everyone is engaging in that, whereas in national systems, that's not always the case. And so ultimately, I think aspirational education isn't just about copying or replicating a particular institutional model. It's about finding the principles at the core of, and I've mentioned belonging, socially responsible leadership, that at CIS we're working on so hard, that global competencies, that all of those things are translated into daily decisions and daily interactions, and that the students have those as lived experiences. I don't know
Thank
if
you
I answered
so
all three levels of your question, Camilla. I
Yeah,
hope
you
so.
did. You did. You covered,
Yeah.
you touched upon them and sort of
Okay.
you intersected them as well. And I know we're running a little bit over time, but I do want to ask this very burning question that I have to Lewis, because I want to loop everything that Arissa and Robert just said, particularly the aspirational aspect and the sort of the different levels of society that you both talked about. Lewis, what can policymakers learn from this? Because the key thing that we're talking about, Robert just talked about how service learning is a big part and something that he wants to replicate, and he thinks it should be. But service in many countries that UWC exists is coming under a lot of pressure. That service has to be reimagined. It certainly is very different even at Atlantic College from when I think you and I were there. So
Yeah.
what can policymakers learn from this?
No, perhaps I'll go to sort of, Kurt Hand's signature maxim, which was, there is more in you than you think. And really sort of that became a guiding motto for the UWCs and the relevance and importance of experiential learning as a way to uncover latent courage, as a way to uncover resilience and compassion. And again, I would say on a personal note, these have all been sort of words that have become a compass for my own life. And so what do they mean at a national or a global scale? I think that, particularly on the day that we're living today, how to really sort of embed purpose and global citizenship alongside academic rigor or, sort of really sort of becomes an important angle to really sort of making service, making environmental stewardship or intercultural collaboration as core requirements of an education system. Because we need to design learning around around cohort-based communities that cultivate empathy, that cultivate conflict resolution, that sort of really sort of put teamwork as a core skill. And these are the types of values that society and also employers sort of really sort of care about, but standard systems today underprovide. And how prioritizing experiential project-based pedagogies through like fieldwork or service learning or outdoor challenges are all mechanisms to build agency, to build leadership, to really sort of how to think our problem solving that it's applicable to local or to labor markets or to civic life, that ultimately sort of really help people navigate their own lives. And I want to also emphasize, again, in a world that is becoming increasingly unequal, how to promote diversity, how to promote equity in educational communities. It's again sort of at the very essence of education because it helps us strengthen social cohesion.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was, I mean, I was madly taking notes, as you could probably see, because there were a lot of words that were really important. I had actually a question at the end, but I think it's going to be covered because I was going to ask about the key takeaways that you took, but I think all of you have actually really covered that in yours as you spoke. And I can see that Faith is looking very stressed out because we are 10 minutes over from when we were supposed to end. So I'm going to now open up the space for the Q&A, and I'm going to start asking the questions that have been asked already, and I'm going to do them slightly thematically. Just to explain to the audience as well, we were supposed to be up until the hour, but we will extend that for 30 minutes more for those who want to stay. We do understand that some people are busy and everybody's in different time zones. I know some people may be fasting, so we will let you go as you fit, but we will be around for another 45 minutes as well. So to the panel, this question is going to be to Lewis and for starters. In contexts where institutional or cultural norms may conflict with the principles that we fostered through UWC's value-based education, value-based in quotation marks, how do we keep upholding those principles? That's a really important question, I think.
Look, again, I think that values-based education is seeking sort of to buttress and emphasize sort of those sets of core values that can be used as an anchor to then build around sort of all kinds of other capabilities and skills. And we need to diversity is part of the fabric of the world. And so again, so how to think about sort of, being able to incorporate and understand and be sensitive to other perspectives is at the very core of a values-based education. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. And again, I think the real challenge of a values-based education is really sort of, how do you foster communities where respect, where intercultural understanding, where differences is not an obstacle, but it's actually a strength.
I'll jump in as well, if I may, and say, if you look in from a school perspective, again, I'm very much head of school. It's really interesting to see what schools value, and you can see what they value by what they, how they celebrate and what prizes they give out. So back in Colombia, I was there for 11 years, and at CGB we had 1 million more values awards than just the certificates for those who are getting 7s or whatever. Here at Oeiras International School as well, we do celebrate, of course, the students who are doing brilliantly academically, but we have also multiple opportunities for students to flourish and to be publicly recognized for sustainability, for service, for caring, for and taking the IB learner attributes and really publicly celebrating those things, because that shows that from the top, it is something that we love, that we encourage, that we embrace, and that we celebrate. It stops it being like a tokenistic thing, a bolt-on, and it's something that the students are working really hard. They want to do their best, and some of them will be on the honor roll. Personally, I'm not a fan of an honor roll, but it's part of our traditions. But there are also students who are working really, really, really hard to get the value awards, and that's, I think, something that's really important, so that we're valuing the values essentially.
Thank you. Actually, yes, go ahead, Arissa, please.
Okay, thank you. So I don't want to be like challenging both of you, but I'm going to do that because I think that's what we do at UWC. So, as someone who was doing a lot of different projects while at UWC. I had my NGO that I was working on still while I was at UWC. I was involved with UNESCO, as I still am while at UWC, as well as, trying to be involved within my college community, like starting Peace Council and other elements. One thing I will have to say is that, and I saw it was a question that came in our Q&A, it was not easy to do that alongside also trying to maintain good grades in the IB. And if I'm being very transparent, I did not get good grades in the IB because I chose that to focus on other elements of the UWC experience. And as a recent graduate, I think it's very essential that I voice that a lot of UWC students still feel this sort of pull in two different directions. One is to try and, get really good scores in our IB, and another is to really take advantage of, what I shared earlier, the stories, the people, the community, the learning that happens, in other areas of UWC. And so, I do agree that, we live in a meritocratic society, right? Where our systems make it still very hard to measure young people in ways that go beyond grades, and that's unfortunate. But I've seen, people like myself fall through the cracks a little bit because, we don't have proper systems yet to measure young people beyond grades. And that is something that I hope can be a call to action, to people like you two, my co-panelists who are, leaders in education, because it's amazing we can have, we can, put young people, like, give them awards and stuff. But at the end of the day, like, if they're not getting accepted into XYZ because the system doesn't allow them to be accepted because they only accept people with a 97 average or a 40 plus in the IB, like, what are we doing, right? And so it has to go beyond that, and that's the challenge I wanted to bring.
Arissa, thank you. You're giving me goosebumps hearing you say this. It's something I fully agree with you. One of the things that frustrates the living daylights out of me is something I call educational abuse in a way, because if you're applying to universities in many countries, they don't want to see the finished product even. They want to see your GPA from when you were 15. And when you're 15, you're covered in acne, you are angry that the person you love doesn't know you exist, and you've got other stuff going on. Why are those grades important for making a decision? And what we also know is when we talk to our colleagues who work in admissions, and I'm very lucky in my role as chair of the Council of International Schools, we're doing so much work at the moment between the realm of schools and the realm of universities and finding that intersectionality to say, we've got to stop this whole point where the schools are saying, why are you doing this to us? University saying, why aren't you sending me the best students? What we know is that on average, admissions tutors, when they find the application form in front of them, a student has taken months and liters of blood, sweat, and tears to produce, max 2 minutes. Max 2 minutes. They are not reading everything that has been done. And we need to find a way, as you said, to better measure the human being in its full capacity, not just the number that is stuck to their head. And the number also comes back to privilege and how much time you want to invest in getting the best grade possible, because you might be able to go home to a system that will still accept you, whereas you might not be able to go home, punto, not just, it's very complex. And I remember having this same conversation 30 years ago at Adriatic with friends, and I was like, why are you studying so hard? And then I got the privilege slap. It's like, you can go back to the UK if you want, and all they're interested in is your final grade. I can't. That was a wake-up call. And so, yes, I hear you. I feel your pain. I remember the pain from 30 years ago. And I promise, as a leader working within my area, it's a fight we're having. We're working with the IB, we're working with the college, with the college board, we're working with Cambridge, we're working with all these and loads of universities and loads of schools precisely to address this point. It's simply not fair.
So I'm gonna pitch in just a bit, because we have a couple of questions actually that engage with what you're talking about a little bit, and I'm going to just shorten the question that somebody has asked. I think their name is Kosi Zulu. I might be saying the name wrong. What modifications should we make, if any, to make the IB curriculum better support the kind of resilience and the kind of beyond the classroom learning that Arissa has highlighted, and that you're absolutely right is a part of almost all of our experiences, and also that enables the students to thrive post UWC. Robert, I'm going to come back to you really quickly on this, and then I'm going to ask Arissa and.
So it's a conversation we're having all the time. The IB's got very kind of, you've got to do this, 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 and this, and there's a plate, and you can't keep putting stuff on, right? So we have to be very smart when we are kind of architects of the time that we have available for teachers to be working, for students to be learning. One of the things that we emphasize at Oeiras International School is social and emotional learning, and making it an embedded part of the curriculum. Not something that is like, oh, you've just got to do this. It's something that we need to do because we need to give it the time it deserves. So as a mentor with my Year 9 group, every single Friday, I spend one full lesson with them, and we're off curriculum. We're not doing any learning that's ever going to be examined or assessed, but we are doing loads of thinking, loads of talking, challenging each other. And I think that kind of vehicle where we're looking at, we cannot avoid the levels of depression that we have, the anxiety, the either attempted suicides or the suicides that are taking place with our young people. We've got to be doing everything. I'm so over hearing people talking about resilience for our young people. It's not about resilience. That's what we were going through with COVID. We need to be talking about being able to adapt to stuff that life throws at us. And that's a much more positive way of looking at it. Resilience is just putting armor and waiting to be punched and no. Just let them be kids, let them be young people, but finding ways to support them, develop their ability to adapt, I think is really key, and that has to be timetabled. In a UWC, well, obviously we can do stuff after the timetable, and so much of this can take place formally and informally, in the common rooms, over the Mensa table or whatever. But you can't take your eye off the formal part, because if you do, you could go to UWC and never have those conversations, and that's not okay.
Arissa, do you have anything to add to that? Because of that wonderful plan that Robert has put out, which is.
I have so much to add and not enough time, unfortunately. But
I'm going to ask you to do it really quickly, because I have some questions I need to ask Lewis.
Sorry, I can just speak about this for hours. Okay, one thing that was really frustrating for me recently, even though my teachers were some of the best people in the world that I met while at UWC, one thing that drove me and my peers crazy was the amount of time where I heard in class or where we had conversations about this is how you get a seven. You have to answer in this way. You have to say this to get this point and this point and that point and this point. And it almost felt like we were spending more time learning how to take our final IB exams than actually learning the content of the course. And so that is what I would say the biggest problem is with IB. We need to radically change how we, again, I'm saying it again, measure our students. Maybe measure is not even the right way. Why are we making students feel like they need to be, on this some sort of scale between other people? Like we're all so different, and that's something that UWC is, a pioneer about, right? We're trying to bring diverse people together. So I would say to anyone who has IB or power in the IB, please try and change this. I know I was at the IB Global Conference a few months ago, and there was some talks about how do we establish something like open book exams, which is a great first step. And how do we do that so that, students like me who, again, are more visual learners, we don't have to be spending hours and hours memorizing and trying to train to take an exam. Because again, is that what we want to do in a time of AI and tools? We need to build those human skills, that social emotional learning component, as our other panelists said. So that's my main contribution.
Arissa, respectfully, the problem's not with the IB, it's with the universities or what and with the students' mentality and with the teachers teaching those courses. That is not IB. That is not acceptable that a teacher is telling you that. That is not IB. That is not the problem. The problem is with the individual teachers teaching like that.
In fact, I think the new pathways, Robert, I think the new pathway is actually looking to address that. They're trying to, to me, the new pathways curriculum is probably one of the most exciting things happening in international education at the moment. I'm going to take just a quick gap just to bring Faith in, because I think Faith wants to, for those who want to leave on the hour, I think Faith wants to wrap up, but please, nobody go away, because we are going to continue and have some burning questions.
Thank you so much, Camilla, and to all of our panelists as well for such a robust conversation. And the chat is going off as much as the Q&A. This is a wonderful point for us to be able to imagine together the roles that we individually will play in helping to shape a better educational future for ourselves. So for those who have to drop off on the hour, I want to thank you very much for being a part of the conversation. We will continue for the next 30 minutes. And as much as you are with us and asking questions, we'll do our best to engage. And you can feel the passion, of course, from our panelists. So to everyone who has joined us, I want to thank you very much. The next UWC Impact Talk would be in May. So look out for the invitations to join us again for the next conversation. But for now, the conversation continues, and I'll hand right back to Camilla.
Thank you so much, Faith. So, Luis, I have quite a weighty question for you. One of our our attendees have said that you talked about the cost of, $55 to, was it $55 you said to
on
educate?
Average.
On average, yeah. I mean, I've seen that figure before as well. And the question that they ask is, do you have an estimate for the amount? But I'm going to adapt that question. Do you actually have an estimate for the amount that would be needed to educate a student for in a manner that will equip them across the board, across contexts?
Look, there's no one magic number, and maybe I'll use it as an opportunity to plug. We will have in the coming months a major global report on education financing that sort of tries to really unpack how to think about the adequacy of education financing, in different contexts. Then to look at the efficiency of education spending, because also we need to recognize that a lot of money is wasted in the way that it's being used, and then ultimately to really think about the equity of investment. Not everybody needs the same, so how to really sort of make investments for those who need it the most. It's also really important. Overall, we can see, for example, trends about how many countries higher education captures a lion's share of investment versus foundational learning, early childhood education, and we know that this is, for example, highly regressive, because people who are usually better off tend to be the ones that go to higher education. So again, we really need to think about the whole package of how the adequacy, the efficiency, and the equity in education spending to really so then make the necessary adjustments and to make sure that those who need it the most are able to receive the basic sets of resources that will make a difference and will give them the opportunity that education brings.
But so building on those points, there's another question, and I'm going to adapt that as well. How do we expand the voices that are involved in these narratives, right? Arissa brought out about youth voices, and one of our attendees has said that how can particularly African youth, but I'm going to expand Africa to the global South. How can they be involved in that decision making?
And again, Arissa is very much involved with UNESCO. I think that again, sort of some of the international organizations that sort of play an important role in the global stage of making the multiple voices heard. Education affects us all, and education is the big equalizer and the greatest opportunity that people can have to start, in the best possible way in life and to realize their potential. So it is really sort of crucial for all voices to be heard and everybody to being able to lean into sort of to speak as to sort of what is it that we need and in what ways education systems need to respond to sort of satisfy the needs of children with disabilities, children with that are refugees, children that are living in fragile or conflict afflicted states are all sort of they all demand different types of interventions and different types of responses oftentimes we talk about the learning crisis, an invisible crisis. Usually when there is a pandemic, everybody knows about it, and so that puts into place all kinds of responses and political responses, social responses to address them. Oftentimes the needs of children go unheard.
Thank you. Absolutely. That's so important to bring them all in together. There's a question, a very interesting question, and this is for Robert. And I'm going to read it out word for word. In countries such as Colombia, teaching English as a second language becomes almost the leading objective of education. And certainly for a country like Pakistan, that's also the same where I'm from. How do you see the importance of second languages teaching in an AI translated world?
Thanks, Irene. It's lovely to see you again. Look, I am a linguist, and the purpose of learning a language is not just to translate, it's to be able to unlock culture, it's to be able to understand diverse stories, it's to be able to meet people, it's to be able to read poetry, listen to music, think differently, and be exposed to different ways of thinking. The problem actually is far bigger in Colombia, because actually the people who are learning English are already in the privileged financial elite. So and this is part of our selection process, it's just not okay. And UWC, this is a big thing for us. If we want to be fully inclusive as an organization, we've got to be so smart in how we're supporting students arriving with very little English. Otherwise, we're just cutting out 95% of countries left, right, and center. Of course, it's going to make things easier. I've just seen something released on the internet the other day, and if you have a certain brand of earphones, you can press a button and you can listen to Japanese and it's translating. Great if you're on holiday, fantastic. But actually, I think we still are going to need, I hope we are still going to need to be acquiring foreign languages. And so I think, any educational system should have that ability or that need to learn a foreign language. It also helps you understand your own language. When you're exposed to a completely different language, you understand more about yourself. So I think, Irene, the question is probably rather to what extent should we be ensuring that all educational systems are teaching a foreign language? And as an addendum, to what extent they should also be helping students find shortcuts with AI if they need just a little bit of Urdu, if they're going to go and speak to Camilla's auntie who doesn't speak English, whatever, so that they can be those human connections.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That was so spot on. I have two questions that really are so close to me as in terms of the work that I do. And I'm going to pose this to the whole panel, but I'm going to go one by one and asking. And they're from Shikhar Arora and Girish Kumar. They're two different questions, but they're basically asking the same thing. How do we reimagine an education that is really the core question of this whole thing. How do we reimagine an education where right now, and as Shekhar says, you have access to education, but it doesn't change mindsets. It doesn't create the change makers that exist, that are needed. So how do we improve that quality? And Shikhar says, how do we work with policymakers to achieve that? And Girish says, how do we change the content to create more empathetic and more sort of connected students? So I'm going to we'll have to keep it a little bit shorter. So I'm going to start with Lewis and then move to Arissa and then to Robert. Sorry, you're muted, I think, Lewis.
Look, but perhaps I'll just try to.
No, you're good. You're good.
No, can
you're
you hear
good.
me?
Yeah, you're good.
I'll just try to also bring
Sorry, the sound seems
together
to have
some of the
gone.
strengths that were sort of raised before. Can you hear me?
Okay.
I am unmuted. Yeah, you can. Yeah.
No, it's good.
The technology of schooling, it's essentially the same since the 1850s. Yeah, so like when you walk into a classroom, also it's really hard to tell where you are because you could be anywhere. Classrooms look pretty much the same in terms of the having sort of a bunch of students in one space and with one or two facilitators. Now, what has really shifted is that historically, education was trying to transmit content to children. And now with the technological revolution, that is increasingly irrelevant because we all carry sort of some type of smartphone in the back of our pockets, and you can access to any kind of information at a finger's tapping immediately. And so how to shift educational systems to really sort of promote critical thinking, how to promote teamwork, how to promote executive functioning. It's all becoming at the forefront, but it's hard to measure. It's hard to do, and there are no clear protocols that are well established and that are well researched to being able to do so. And so, yes, education needs a major transformation to really sort of be relevant for the 21st century, and what that looks like in a standardized sort of a mass sort of channel, it's still a work in progress. And I think that again, it behooves us all in the broad education community to being able to lean in and to really sort of think through hard. And then sort of do the careful research and thinking through as to sort of what this model should look like. So in what ways really sort of we are servicing the next generation of our future to be able to really sort of make the most of their lives and make a difference to our larger communities.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Arissa, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to share is when I first started my NGO, one of the main priorities we had was to create a space for young people to have conversations around global issues. So we launched something called our Pen Pal program. This is with my NGO called Project Power Global. And basically we worked with young people in a community in a rural community in India that we had a partnership with, and a school here in Canada. And basically the young people were paired and they had like a pen pal across the world. And both schools did like this 5-week program on 5 different global issues. And then the young people had an opportunity to sort of build a project or a campaign around one of these issues and talk about it with their pen pal. And through that program that we were able to run, I saw how just even making space and time in a classroom setting to have conversations that go beyond perhaps the standard curriculum can really allow young people to be more creative or figure out sort of what areas they're passionate about. Something that I also talk about a lot with peers is when you're, going through very your formative years, you might not know sort of what you're passionate about. And this is why education, it has to go so much more than just what we think of school being math, science, all these standard subjects, and talk about different areas that we could engage young people in. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing I wanted to add is, how do we do this? So that's a great question. And, I'm very proud to now be working with UNESCO on something called their Youth and Student Network. And it's basically a collective of just over 100 of us that are working in the education space. We're all young people, and we're trying to bring the youth voice into, higher conversations that happen at organizations like UNESCO. And one of the things we're working on now that I would love to invite all the young people and also all of you to help us with is, we're looking at how do we want to see education post 2030. So as I'm sure we all are, most of us are aware, the Sustainable Development Goals will end in 2030, and we have to think beyond that. And now with colleagues at the network, we're trying to, build this new SDG 4, this new education. What do we envision for it? And we're trying to do that with young people. So there will be a global survey that we're going to launch. So I will make sure to share that with all of you and the network so that young people can participate. But I think that's what I would say, right? If you're trying to involve young people, just create systems for them to share their voices. So yeah, that's what I want to add.
My
Thank you.
goodness, Arissa, you really are. I agree with Robert. You're doing way more than I think I've done in all the years and I have a particular question that I'm going to come back to you with on that. But Robert, to you, please.
So I'm thinking of this through two models. One, from a place of privilege where you can start and kind of just create something and know that it's going to give everyone what they need to go on to the next steps, which is really, really important. And the other is, okay, well, what about if you do something really cool that can't then be taken back to help you on your next step? So I think, when we're thinking at policy level, within a national context, education is dictated to schools, and it kind of trickles down from government, right? So you have all these politicians, and often they're making decisions and they want to look good, and it's about them, actually not about the young people and their learning, and so they keep piling stuff onto the plates. With a system like the IB, it's supranational. There is no government above them, and so when decisions are made, they're made by educationalists. It doesn't mean they're perfect, but it means it's coming from a place of learning, made by people who think about this all day, every day. It's part of their kind of own academic DNA. And that freedom is something I really, really love. If I compare what it was like working in a national system to working in an IB system, the changes, I feel that my young people, my staff, me, my team, we all have a voice in those changes. And that's something fantastic. And so I think my conclusion is, and again, this comes also because the IB is very expensive. So maybe the question is rather funding, because working within UWC, because we're so strong with the IB, finding ways to make changes like the systems transformation pathway that is really, I just think, incredible. It still gives the students the IB diploma. It's still out of 45. So universities don't need to have a meltdown thinking, how are they going to understand this and fit this within their system? Because it's all about numbers and the equivalency here and the equivalence here. It works, but it's radically changing the way learning in chunks of the diploma are taking place. And I think that is where UWC, where we have a really strong opportunity to lead. I'm still cognizantly aware of the fact it's mostly for a privileged economic elite, though there are many state schools popping up. And in Colombia, I'm so proud to see so many state schools being supported to be able to open up and offer the IB. So it's no longer just for a socioeconomic bracket in Colombia, it's actually for anyone. And when that happens, I think the opportunity to have an impact and to leave a footprint that goes beyond our 18 UWC schools and colleges, that's incredible. But working with what we've got to make sure that we're not closing doors for our young people and their futures.
But Robert, I have a question actually building up on what you just said, because the IB is kind of a resource-heavy curriculum. It requires a lot of teacher training. It requires a lot of, sort of engagement. And how do you think that can be applied? I mean, will it adapt, for example, in a low resource or under-resourced schooling environment in Colombia?
I mean, It's a really good question. I don't know the answer. It is something I should be more up on. I know in Ecuador and in Ecuador they had huge amounts of state schools opening, and I know they have had a lot of challenges. I used to be the president of ACBI, which is a local chapter of IB Schools Network, basically for Colombia. And we were offering a lot of training. So we were saying we will fund training for people who are in state schools wanting to do the IB, that they could come and receive the training with us. And we were an authorized workshop provider, for example. So there are lots of things where we can show as IB Schools service learning and really support our colleagues who don't have the same advantages that we have, perhaps, to be able to access those resources. But it is an expensive program. The requirements, as you say, for the teachers to be receiving the professional development, that is also not cheap. Although now it's becoming more accessible because you can also access the learning online, which makes things a lot easier. It's also much more carbon friendly, so you don't have to get on a plane to go and experience that learning. So I think there's lots that can be done both at the IB level, but also kind of within systems of schools. I know, for example, here in Portugal, there are some IB teachers that are coming to run a workshop for maths, and we've been invited as a non-UWC school to go along and receive that training as well. So just opportunities for us to share best practice, I think, is super important.
That and always is, and creating that community practice is so important. Lewis, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Have you seen research where the IB has been implemented, perhaps at using less resources or cheaper resources than, let's say, the UWCs have access to? I'm a researcher of sort of low-cost communities, and that's
I have not seen research of this type, but perhaps I would sort of go back to the question of sort of what are the core principles and values that sustain the IB, and in what ways these are adaptable and transferable and relevant to different types of contexts. And I think, again, I emphasize relevance because also we should not assume that the IB curriculum is universal. And so I do think that in that ways, again, ultimately, sort of, if we use social emotional learning as an anchor, as really sort of how do we ensure that children today are stimulated in a way that sort of they are critical thinking, their problem solving, their ability to sort of work in teams, their ability to communicate, self-confidence, being able to sort of lean into sort of and having the ability to express their perspectives are all sort of core functions that we want the children of today possess, and then sort of how do you build a program based on the resources that are available, both human and financial, that sort of stimulate that. And it's not about fancy books. It's not about having super duper labs where kids can sort of are able to do some type of experiment. But it's really about how do we use the resources that are available locally to really stimulate those sets of values and capabilities that we want to see in all children.
And that's a lot of what teaching at the right level also includes, using low cost resources. Absolutely brilliant. That's a brilliant answer. Thank you so much. I have a question now for everybody, which is a question very close to my heart also as an alumnus. And I will start with Arissa again as the most recent alumnus. How do you sustain the ethos? You come out, UWC is a bubble. We live in this wonderful, beautiful space where you're accepted and everything, your voice gets heard. And then you enter the real world, which is filled with lots of things that are not as pretty, and racism, or you're looked at the color of your skin or your gender, or how do we sustain the ethos?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think when I left UWC in May, I guess I what kept me going is realizing I was just leaving it physically in a way, but not in terms of the community. And we're so lucky now to have tools to keep us connected, right? Just like today's webinar. I think for me, I talk a lot about how young people can make a difference in the world. And something that I often say is about the ripple effect of change. And I really believe that change doesn't always have to be coming from these big, grand decisions. It really can start with everyday small actions we can take. And I think that's the main way I try and stay close to the ethos. I try and, do things in my everyday life that continue to make a difference and stand for peace, which I think is what the main lesson UWC taught me. And the other thing is, we talk about how critical thinking and all these th skills are what we learn through IB and all these things. And I think UWC has kind of positioned me to reach for more and to not settle anymore, to stand up for when things are wrong, and to have higher expectations of myself, but also the community that I'm with, and also be creative in how to sort of solve problems that maybe I wouldn't have ever felt like I could solve before UWC. So yeah, but at the end, it all starts with that ripple effect of change and that everyday action. That's something that we can all commit to in our daily lives.
Brilliant. Thank you. One of the other panelists, Robert, do you want to go?
Sure.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead, Robert. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I just think I'm the luckiest person ever because I get to hang around with young people. I could not work in an office with adults. I think I would be depressed beyond belief. I get to be surrounded by hope and optimism and wonderfulness and innocence, and sometimes not so much innocence, but I get to be with young people, and every single day we come to work and our job is to create the kindest, most wonderful, well-adapted world citizens that we can possibly do. So I think that's I get to live, and I'm in international school, so I get to live it every day. I think that also relying on allies, so being the best ally I can be for people who are different, but also as an out gay head of school, married to a man with a son, is very public. I can't do anything that could be seen to be inclusive for my LGBTQ plus members, because people would say I've got an agenda, and it's actually the kind of that whole like battle fatigue, but being able to rely on colleagues to step up and do that part of my job, because I'm the biggest ally for everyone, but I can't do it for that. So yeah, I think find your tribe, be the best ally for everyone else, and rely on other people where you need it, and have as much contact with young people as possible, because thankfully they keep me sane.
Oh, absolutely agree with you. Can't love being a teacher and an educator. Lewis.
Well, I work in an office with lots of older people. But, I think the important part is to really sort of keep young at heart. And having just, being part of my 40th UWC reunion, and where like about 2/3 of the cohort showed up. These are people that are coming from all over the world and at, great sort of, expense, sort of, really sort of took the trouble, the time to spend sort of, a weekend all together. It really speaks to sort of the imprint that the experience has left in all of us. And I've already mentioned so that for me the words of Kurhan have been a compass in my own life. There's more in me than I think, and so that has helped me navigate the ups and downs of life, the challenges that are presented, and sort of being able to sort of have that social emotional anchor of saying like I have it in me to being able to face this and find my way through it. We don't always get what we want, but we can always find a way to deal with the cards that we've been dealt. And I think to me that's the way to really sort of keep those sets of values and those sets of experiences alive, and ultimately sort of not only that we're living from the past, but we're being nurtured by the past into a future that again, it's continuously changing and challenging us in a way that allows us to grow, that allows us to be in uncomfortable spaces, and then being able to pick up those lessons from experience that makes us stronger, that makes us better, that makes us more resilient, that makes us more adaptive, that makes us more successful, and then ultimately sort of, are the ingredients that we built our lives upon.
Absolutely brilliant. I couldn't agree more. I think one thing that perhaps if I have the liberty to take as the moderator to say is that you have a fundamental belief that there is good in the world and that there is good even in people who don't appear it. And I think that is certainly something that has carried me throughout, because we lived for 2 years in this environment where, where we did have this bubble. For me, I want to say a deep, deep thank you to all my panelists. It has been an absolute privilege and pleasure to be moderating this session. I also want to say thank you to the participants the attendees who have been participating so actively and so richly. Their comments, I've been looking at them as they go along, and these excellent questions. So thank you for this, and thank you to Faith and his team for including me in this. And I will hand it over to him now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you also very much for being a part of the conversation. I want to echo your words, Camilla, to Lois, Robert, and Arissa for a very, very healthy and robust conversation. And I want to thank all of our attendees as well, both for joining us as well as for the engagement in the Q&A and in the chat. It has been really exceptional to have this space to deliberate together about how we are collectively shaping a better future through this educational space. Our focus, of course, is on the role that each of us can play as architects of a new humanity. We are all helping to shape a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world. And we can continue to be that together, working at various levels of society. So whether you find yourself taking daily actions at your own level, with your family, with your community, with your school, with your workplace, or whether you find yourself with a platform to help to develop systems-level solutions or at a policy level, we're all part of this process of shaping a better future. We are all architects of a new humanity. For a second, I will close on the UWC model, how we actually do this. What UWC believes is that if we are going to shape a more peaceful, just, and sustainable future for all, we begin that process by identifying communities of deliberately diverse young people from all parts of the world, people who show that potential and promise to help to make a better future. People like Luis 40 years ago, and people like Arissa 2 years ago, people who bring their promise and their potential to UWC from wherever they're coming from. And what we do very, very well is to create spaces in our schools through our short courses for them to experience what is a mission-driven, values-oriented experiential education. The purpose of our education is to equip young people with the dispositions and the sense of agency to take actions individually and collectively in the cause of peace and a sustainable future. And the best part of our work is what we do over the course of their lives, to continue to connect them to each other, to the UWC mission, and to further opportunities so that they can live out the promise and the potential they had shown on day one. And being able to re-engage with Luis 40 years post-graduation, and re-engage with Robert 30 years post-graduation, and re-engage with Arissa 6 months post-graduation. This is the UWC spirit in practice. We look forward to having you join us once again for our next UWC Impact Talk on the 27th of May. Please plan to join us and you will get the invitation. From all of us, thank you very much, and we wish you a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.